further you get into an election campaign, the more Tory MPs are confronted with voters who bring them their concerns, their problems, their views. I think probably the less realistic it is to go around saying that you believe you can win. Now, it doesn't make it any easier if you are a Conservative activist going knocking on doors, delivering leaflets to hear it. But I think it is the accepted position within the party now that look, it is unlikely, as Grant Shapps says. It's very unusual, don't get me wrong. It's a very strange thing for a senior politician to say on air. But I suppose this is quite a strange election, isn't it?
Let's talk to our political editor, Kate McCann. Hello, Kate.
Hi, John.
I start with the Tories then. Look, I have always stuck to the habit of not taking election results completely for granted, if only out of respect for voters. This Tory tactic, Kate, of accepting that they're beaten, applying for the job of opposition, it's now established, and it's a new one on me.
Yeah, it's difficult though, isn't it? Because when the Conservatives are so far behind in the polls, and the polls are consistently showing at least a 20-point lead for the Labour Party, it's very difficult to try and turn that around, to try and say that you think it is credible for the Tories to believe that they can win the next election. And if they do go around suggesting that they're still in with a fighting chance, it also goes to ignore the mood of the country, I think. And the further you get into an election campaign, the more Tory MPs are confronted with voters who bring them their concerns, their problems, their views. I think probably the less realistic it is to go around saying that you believe you can win. Now, it doesn't make it any easier if you are a Conservative activist going knocking on doors, delivering leaflets to hear it. But I think it is the accepted position within the party now that look, it is unlikely, as Grant Shapps says. It's very unusual, don't get me wrong. It's a very strange thing for a senior politician to say on air. But I suppose this is quite a strange election, isn't it? It's the first one where a party has gone through this part of the cycle, 14 years in government, in the glare of social media and 24-hour news. In 1997, it wouldn't have been this way. So in a way, everybody's trying to navigate something quite new. And I suppose the Tories are trying to toe that line between being at least partially honest and still trying to compete.
Yeah, and of course trying to, as it were, guilt or scare those who are about to desert them at the polling booth to stay loyal to the Tories, maybe persuade Labour that they needn't vote because it's all in the bag. And what about reform? They have published their contract, not calling it a manifesto, bursting, isn't it, with populist pledges, huge tax cuts, slashing migration. Some of the detail, though, Kate, is a little bit dubious, and the costings seem full of holes. Just a random thought on asylum seekers. They're saying they'll send them back to France. And you think, well, France may have something to say about that.
Yeah, it's not the only thing in the manifesto that seems quite far-fetched, if we're honest, John. And look, Reform, Nigel Farage launching this manifesto or contract today, as they're calling it, because Farage says manifesto just makes people think of a lie. Really, he acknowledged that the party is not going to win the next election. He said that the focus for Reform is 2029. This is the start of a process that he believes is going to take at least another 5 years until Reform are genuinely competitive on the electoral stage. But you're right, this is a document stuffed absolutely full of ginormous tax cuts and quite fundamental changes. Not a huge amount of explanation, though. I think it's around 24 pages of A4, this contract, and there's not very much in the way of detail. It's important to mention those taxes, though, because some of these policies are at the more extreme end. One of them, for example, taking everybody out of income tax until you earn £20,000. At the moment, the tax-free allowance is just over £12,000, so that would be a very significant move. Reform have costed this. They've provided some costings in this document. They say the cost of their policies would be £141 billion, and the savings they could make, largely through things which, again, are not particularly well explained, such as huge government savings and efficiencies. The savings would be 150 billion, leaving them 9 billion of headroom. But Dan Needle, the tax expert, has gone through with a fine-tooth comb himself, and he's worked out that actually the personal tax cuts Reform are promising would actually cost £13 billion more, and their funding sums are out by £15 billion, meaning they've got at least a £38 billion unfunded gap in their proposals today.
That's what you call a gap. Now, what about Labour? What are you thinking about Labour today, Kate?
Yeah, we've seen Rachel Reeves and the Labour leader Keir Starmer today out on a couple of campaign visits, and they are keen to take on this idea that Labour would raise taxes. Now, you talked about Jonathan Ashworth this morning and the difference in language, if you like, between him and Rachel Reeves on this central question of would Labour tinker with those council tax rates. The reason the question is being asked at all is because tax rates for council tax haven't been changed since the 1990s. There is an acceptance that they are probably unfair in lots of cases. People who own very big homes paying same as people who own not so large houses. So there's room for reform there, but it would be incredibly controversial and quite difficult to do. Labour are not keen to do it, but Rachel Reeves is not ruling it out completely. She said, and you heard a clip from her earlier, suggesting it wouldn't be a priority for Labour. I think what the party's trying to do is be as credible as possible on personal taxes, to leave the door open on things like capital gains, and to try and show people that they don't really want to go after trying to claw back as much cash as they possibly can. Interesting that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves today did a Q&A with port workers, and the tone I thought was worth watching. If people haven't heard it, or go back and have a listen, Keir Starmer was saying he wants to take as many questions as possible, adopting a much more conciliatory tone, being quite honest about the scale of the challenge. And I think for Labour, that's going to be one of the key messages in the next 3 weeks, which is expectation management.
Right. I mean, I suppose Labour can rule out certain tax rises, or they can fudge the question. Difficult to do both, which is what they've been doing this morning. I'm going to be talking to Darren Jones, the Shadow Treasury Minister, see if he can, I don't know, clear this up. I'm not going to put too much money on that happening, mind you. Now, what about some of the big players in the Labour family? Len McCluskey, you used to talk about Len McCluskey a lot, not so much nowadays, but what's he been up to?
Yeah, some interesting news to bring you this afternoon. I'm told that Len McCluskey's membership of the Labour Party has lapsed. And that's an interesting word, isn't it? Lapsed. I'm told that that is essentially because over time it's been clear that his support lies with Jeremy Corbyn and another party, essentially, not Labour, because Corbyn is now standing as an independent in Islington North. And that support means that he's not able to return as a member of the Labour Party. So I've had that confirmed, that Len McCluskey's membership has lapsed. And of course, he has been for a very long time an absolutely key figure in the Labour movement. One of those people that, during Corbyn's time in office was absolutely linked with Corbyn, very close to the manifesto process, very close to the sort of running of the party, if you like. And so, I think it is a real moment. There are lots of people in the party on the sort of new Labour side of the Labour Party who are saying this is a great moment. It's the continuation of what Keir Starmer has been trying to do, which is change Labour, change it into a party that's more credible. But I think this is, for many, the end of an era.
Exit Len McCluskey from the Labour stage left. I'm not sure that Keir Starmer's going to be sobbing too much about that, though. Great to talk to you, Kate. Let's talk again just a bit later on.